everybody. It's Bill and Sterling with USA Tennis Coach, and we're here with Frank Giampaolo. We're very honored to be with Frank Giampaolo.
Salud.
And we're going to be talking a lot about emotional aptitude, and Frank's going to give us some concepts and some stories about emotional aptitude for sports, which is his new book. And it's not just tennis. So if you're a tennis player or you play other sports as well, you know, this is going to be a lot of great content for you. All right, so now, Frank, tell us a little bit about your background as a tennis coach.
Well, all right, as a tennis coach, it's about a 30-year career so far. I actually started teaching at the Vic Braden Tennis College in 1984. So the quick story is, right out of college, we drove to California. I had buddies, though, that they wanted to go to Las Vegas. And so at the last minute, I ditched the Las Vegas trip with the guys and go to the Vic Braden Tennis College because I wanted to teach tennis. So I got there, and of course there were no jobs to be had. And I remember Vic's wife Melody telling me that they get about 12 resumes every week. But I asked if I can just sit on the court and watch and observe and take notes. So after a whole week of doing that, I was offered a job at the tennis college. And so back in the day, that was the place to be. It was the National Tennis Research Center. And the Vic Braden Tennis College was probably even the precursor to all the tennis academies, like the Bollettieri's and stuff.
So let's talk about the mental and emotional components of tennis. And so when it comes to assembling a game plan, tell us a little bit about that.
Well, that's the beginning, really, of understanding strategy and tactics. Is you have to understand your personal brain type and body type, how you're wired, your genetic predisposition. Also, though, how you were brought up and how you were nurtured, it plays a big role. But what we try to do with adult athletes all the way down to the top juniors is they have to identify their own styles of play, from an A plan to a B plan to a C plan. So basically there's about 4 styles we see at every tournament around the world. There's hard-hitting baseliners. That might be your A plan. There's all-court net rushers. There's retrievers. And then there's even like drop shot artists, real finesse players. So it's really essential, though, that you understand at least your A plan, your B plan, maybe even your C plan. Because in tennis, it's a little bit like rock, paper, scissors, if you remember that from back when we were kids. If you're a rock, but your opponent is a bigger rock, you're not going to win. So if you're a hard-hitting baseliner, they're a hard-hitting baseliner, but they're a little bit better, they might beat you 10 matches in a row. But if you have a B plan of like high and heavy, counter puncher, retriever style, that style might be the exact style that beats that same opponent the next 5 times. So having game plans is really big.
All right. Now, when it comes to categorizing your opponent's style of play, how does that play into your selection of your style? What kind of categories do you put them into, and how specific does that get?
Well, so now we're talking even about step 2. I think it's really important that you understand with these different styles, there's strengths and weaknesses that's inherent in every style. So if you are playing against a backcourt retriever, sometimes they call them pushers or moonballers. There's certain patterns that an athlete can run to diffuse that style. So for example, if you're having trouble beating pusher retrievers, you might want to use short angle patterns or a high and heavy approach shot to swing volley. So moonball approach to swing volley. You might want to even use things like drop shots to draw them into the net, since they're usually not too comfortable volleying. But of course this means you need skills. You need both primary and secondary strokes to be able to be, really crafty retrievers. So with every style of play, there's different systems that you could use to destroy that style.
Okay, so let's say 2 players are playing their A game, and then the one player who's losing realizes they need to shift to their B game.
Yeah.
Do you have any stories that illustrate, a player switching style and then coming out on top?
Yeah, right on. I'll give you a story from when my daughter Sarah played the adult U.S. Open. At 15 years old, she was lucky. She was a good player, but she was ranked #1 in the nation in tennis. So at 15, they gave her a wild card into the U.S. Open. She played Barbara Rettner, who was a 30-year-old German player, ranked about 80 in the world at that time. In the first set, Barbara came out hard-hitting baseliner. Sarah won 6-4. And we're thinking, geez, she won a set at the Open. This is pretty cool. Barbara gets up in front of about 2,000 people in the stands and starts to go to the net the whole second set. Serve and volley, chip and charge, get in. Sarah goes up 4-1. So now we're thinking, geez, she can win a match at the pro level. Right at 4-1, Barbara gets up from the changeover and starts to moonball everything as high as the lights at the U.S. Open. After 2 games, my daughter Sarah goes, I hate pushers. And she yells that. And Barbara looks over and goes, So guess what Barbara did the rest of the second set?
There you go.
Push. Guess what Barbara did the whole third set? High and heavy moonball. And guess who won $15,800 for that one match? Barbara. Because she had class. She had more than one style.
So, Frank, we all know that tennis is a game not of winners, but of errors and limiting errors, right? So what do you see as really the 4 main causes of errors?
Okay, great question. Often when athletes do make mistakes, they go into anger mode. They're upset. But I recommend instead of doing that, try to flip it. Now, it's the athlete's job to figure out the cause of the error. So there's 4 main causes in a match. There's reckless shot selection. That could cause errors. There's improper movement and spacing around the ball, around the court. That could cause errors. There's poor technique, poor form, whether it's follow-throughs or strike zones or your ball toss on your serve. That could cause errors. But there's also the emotional element, which we're calling emotional aptitude nowadays, and focus. If the athlete is really still in the past, they're worried about being cheated a game ago still, or they're worried about the shots they're missing, and their brain is in the past while their body is playing the next point, that could cause errors, right? So that the 4 main causes, and I think it's the first step in finding solutions and to improving, because you really can't learn how to win until you understand why you lose, and understanding the cause of your error is pretty big. One of the things I see a lot, parents have the apps and they're charting the number of errors. So they chart, for example, their little Joey in a USTA tournament match makes 28 backhand errors. So they send this information to the coach by email or phone or whatever. Now the coach sees 28 backhand errors. So now the coach starts to feed balls right to Joey's backhand to perfect his form. But what if 24 of the 28 errors stem from reckless shot selection? You're wasting all your time. So,
what do you think of the idea of someone actually doing paper and pencil and then maybe writing a note? You know, at that juncture, it looked like the cause of the error was this. Is that a one way to deal with that?
Sure, charting is big. One of the ebooks that I have out even on Amazon is the Match Chart Collection. And one of the charts, there's 10 really different ways to chart in that little booklet. And one of the fun ways is just the cause of error chart. So instead of charting just the strokes, you actually chart with 4 columns the 4 causes. So just, Bill, what we're talking, same idea. What you're talking about is you're not only going to chart the backhand error, but you're going to chart the cause of the error. So at the end of a few matches, now you see that your little Kelly makes 60% of her errors based on poor movement and spacing, not on just stroke production. Mm-hmm. And so now the coaches can identify and jump exactly right on the cause of all the errors.
So that really leads me to think, okay, so if you're, as a player, you're on court and you're having some errors, so between the points and your rituals, talk about how that's really helpful in overcoming and switching how you deal with making errors and how you make adjustments as a player.
Well, all right, it's a good point. Now, between point rituals is something that, coaches have been talking about forever, 100 years. And if you look at tennis in general, we know that most points end quickly, right? We know most points end by the 3rd or 4th hit, about 70%. So if you think about the idea of an athlete on the tennis court, about 80% of the time they're on the court, they're in between point ritual time or changeover time, right? So that's big already, that you understand 80% you're not even hitting a ball. I think it's important, though, that athletes try to reboot a little bit better. I see this often, though, in high performance matches. And I'll give you an analogy that we were talking just yesterday to a little 10-year-old. And so it's like the NASA rocket launch sequence. Now, a lot of kids will lose some points, maybe play a little reckless, and go back to in-between point rituals. And they'll just walk through them quickly. They'll ignore most of them. And they'll play points at like 40% battery life. So what I'm trying to use as an analogy for some of the younger kids is like the NASA rocket launch sequence. All systems have to be go.
I want to be an astronaut.
Yeah. Still, right?
Exactly.
How fun. So a little tennis dude, he's going to say, okay, my physical batteries are at 40%. I'm breathing heavy. I'm a little bit tight. I'm a little bit tired. He can't walk up and play the next point until he gets that system, the physical system, up to 100%. And the mental system, the mental batteries, he has to totally understand exactly what he's going to be trying to do the next point. So the athlete has to have his physical batteries up to 100%, his mental batteries 100%, and the emotional batteries 100%. But what we see, of course, most often is their emotional batteries are drained down to 40% because they're still a little bit angry about the points they were missing. They haven't even planned the next points pattern yet, which of course is the most important stage, right? We all know, and hopefully everybody listening knows already, that you have to walk through these 3 doors in between points. You have to get over the last point. You have to plan the next points pattern. Then you do your relaxing ritual before you serve, maybe, or before you return, right? But most kids don't. So I think it would behoove athletes, adults or juniors, play some practice sets. Don't worry about the point, but try to master the between point rituals a little bit more.
So when the athlete's playing a point, they come up on those mega points, the big points.
Yeah.
So how does this flow into them being able to be proactive when those big points come up and control themselves in this way when they're dealing with that, the battery life, the charge of
Well, I think most tennis athletes anyway, they don't see the fact that all points are not created equal. There are game points. They're bigger points in tennis. And we know from scoring systems, even in pros, an athlete can win 150 points, the other one 158, and the athlete that gets 150 wins the match because they're winning the big points, right? So it's important that athletes know that 6 out of the 8 of the game points are played on the ad side. So I recommend practice a ton on the ad side. If you're doing group clinics, run out to the ad side. Practice your return on the ad. Practice serving on the ad. You want to be a monster on the ad side because 6 out of 8 of all the big points are on the ad. So the second thing that's big is simple, but it's spotting that it's a big point. And we call them mega points. You get a spot, it's a big point, walk away, find the best patterns to run, and usually it's based on you running what you do best. So it's an athlete understanding their top 7 patterns. They know what they do best, and they do that on big points. A story is, I had some top juniors at Indian Wells, and we're charting patterns, and we're charting Rafa Nadal against Ryan Harrison. Rafa hits his slice serve out wide on the ad, runs around, inside out forehand. He did that exact pattern 86% of the time on the ad side. So that's controlling mega points. That's knowing your patterns. He won the match, I think, 3-3. He saved all of his battery life. He saved his energy for later in the tournament. He didn't waste it. And most juniors don't do that. They don't even spot the big points sometimes. So spotting is big. And the last thing I want to say about these mega points is that it's critical to understand that there are positive and negative mega points. Not all mega points are the same. A positive mega point might be you're up 40-15. And you can be a little more aggressive. You can take charge or go a little more bold with your shot selection. But if you're in a negative mega point, it's still a mega point, a negative mega point. Now you're down 15-40. And we see kids going for really reckless shot selections. They're trying to crush the return on the line when they're down 40 love, a negative mega point. So spot the difference between positive and negative.